protected.
Dr. Drobak also questions why the sheriff's office did not execute a warrant for Bruce's phone until July. 2 months into the criminal investigation, the sheriff's office tells Call 6 Investigates it will not discuss details of the case as it is now in the hands of the prosecutor. Tyler Bruce is charged with obstruction of justice because when detectives closed in, they say Bruce had already removed the SIM card from his phone. He's due in court February 5th. Now, this evening, the district sent us a statement in response to this story. It says, quote, NWHSC is focused on the safety of our students and restoring community trust. To that end, we have made dramatic changes to our procedures, policies, staff training, and expectations. We will continue working hard to make the necessary changes and reaching out to our community for their help and ideas, end quote. And Tyler Bruce is on unpaid suspension. He has not provided a comment on the charges to RTV6. Adam Benner has also not responded to our request for an interview.
Covering the State House now, Indiana's lawmakers have spent January working on passing bills that could eventually impact your life. One of the first major deadlines at the State House passed this week, meaning dozens of bills are now dead with no chance of becoming law. That includes a bill to decriminalize marijuana, moving the penalty for possession to an infraction. It did not get a hearing in the Indiana Senate. Another that did not get a hearing would have capped a 30-day supply of insulin at $50. But the bill's author says it may get put into a different bill as an amendment. A proposal to make basketball the official state sport of Indiana did not survive, and a bill to make feminine hygiene products tax-free did not get a hearing. Now let's look at some of the bills that are still on the table this session. A measure that would require the Marion County prosecutor to charge people for small marijuana was approved this week. Pregnant women in the workplace may get more accommodations from their employer if a Senate bill becomes law. The bill would give pregnant workers more frequent breaks, a private non-bathroom space, or assistance with manual labor. Another bill still on the table would protect teachers and schools from penalties over last year's low iLearn scores. Finally, it could soon be illegal to hold your phone while driving under a House bill that passed this week. The bills that did not make this week's deadline could still come back as amendments and other bills, but it's not likely. The next major State House deadline for bills to advance is next week.
The coronavirus is now a public health emergency in the United States, and the White House is putting travel restrictions on people entering the country who have recently traveled to China. Those restrictions apply to foreign nationals except for immediate relatives of U.S. citizens. Several American and international airlines have suspended their flights to and from China. There are 9,800 reported cases of the coronavirus worldwide. The World Health Organization says 2% of those cases are fatal.
A unique museum exhibit is shining a light on Indiana's drug epidemic and the science behind addiction. The Fix opens tomorrow at the Indiana State Museum. It features stories of recovery, the biology behind opioid abuse, and information on getting help. Governor Holcomb was there for today's preview of the exhibit. He says it does something that statistics can't.
Throw out numbers, 12% reduction in prescriptions and 13%, most importantly, in overdose deaths. But those numbers don't capture the huge ripple effect and tearing effect that this is having on not just broadly our society, but specifically with our loved ones.
While the exhibit is open, the State Museum is hosting panels and events about the opioid epidemic. That includes a free naloxone training event tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Delta Airlines is getting rid of the uniforms that hundreds of its employees say have been causing health problems. Hundreds of employees, including 5 from Indiana, filed a federal lawsuit against Land's End, the company that makes the uniforms. They say they've experienced a variety of health problems since Delta introduced the uniforms in May of 2018. Delta says tests showed the uniforms were safe, but the lawsuit challenges claims the employees' own tests found chemicals and heavy metals in the material. Delta says it hopes the new permanent uniforms will be in place by late 2021. Land's End refused to comment on the lawsuit.
Tonight at 11, we'll be taking a look back at a case you might remember that remains unsolved.
23-year-old Angie Barlow disappeared in October of 2016, and her body was found 8 months later, and despite the massive effort to figure out who killed her, no one has been arrested for that crime. For the past 3 years, Lauren Van Sickle has made it her mission to try and uncover information that could help police make an arrest in the case. She's sharing what she learned and talking to those who knew and loved Angie in the locally produced podcast, Crime Pursuit.
She sent a text and said, here's the address of where I'm at in case I go missing, which sadly turned into a very prophetic message to her friend.
Watch RTV6 tonight at 11, right after 2020, to learn more about the case and why Lauren is dedicated to shining a light on Angie's story.
Still ahead on the news at 7, a controversial moment years in the making. A look at what the official arrival of Brexit will mean for the UK.
But first, the latest in the Senate's ongoing impeachment trial when the news at 7 continues.
Storm Team 6 working for you.
Tonight, President Trump's impeachment trial has entered its final phase.
In a narrow vote, Senate Republicans blocked Democratic efforts to extend the trial by introducing new witnesses and evidence. Senate leaders will now determine next steps, including when to hold the vote of acquittal.
ABC's Mona Kassar-Abdi is in Washington now with more.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander, no. Ms. Murkowski, no.
And with those two final votes, the fate on the Democrats' efforts to call witnesses in President Trump's impeachment trial was sealed.
This will set a new precedent. This will be cited in impeachment trials from this point to the end of history.
House managers making a last-ditch effort Friday afternoon to extend the trial to introduce new evidence and testimony, particularly from former National Security Advisor John Bolton.
A trial without witnesses is simply not a trial. You can call it something else, but it's not a trial.
Bolton positioning himself at the center of the debate after reportedly stating in his unpublished book that President Trump told Bolton he withheld military aid from Ukraine for political purposes. An explosive new report from the New York Times also citing Bolton's unpublished manuscript claims President Trump's lead impeachment attorney, Pat Cipollone, was in the Oval Office with Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, and Rudy Giuliani when Trump directed Bolton to press Ukraine's new president to meet with Giuliani, who was trying to gather damaging information on Democrats. The president flatly denies the allegation. But despite the new revelations and repeated pleas from House managers for witnesses, a majority of Republican senators decided they've heard enough. GOP Senator Lisa Murkowski, who was a potential swing vote, writing in a statement, quote, "I have come to the conclusion that there will be no fair trial in the Senate. I don't believe the continuation of this process will change anything." Now, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer have begun discussing next steps, which includes the final vote to acquit President Trump. Senator Schumer says he and McConnell are on the same page about one thing. They do not want to hold the final impeachment vote in the dark of the night, meaning the Senate will likely wait until early next week to decide if President Trump will remain in office. Mona Kassar-Abdi, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
The U.S. is not the only country going through a major political event. After years of debate, Brexit is finally here, and tonight, the United Kingdom officially has left the European Union. Not much will change during the transition period, which lasts through the rest of 2020. Negotiations for a trade deal between the UK and EU begin in March. Britain's Prime Minister will also have to negotiate a deal with the U.S.
Coming up here on RTV6, a prison program is teaching inmates valuable skills as a way to cut down on the number of people who wind up back behind bars once they're done serving time. Kevin.
And the temperature trend next 7 days. Coldest morning 26, but look at this. Warmest afternoon 57. I'll match these with a day of the week coming up.
We fly.
This is RTV6 News at 7, working for you.
Learning a new skill can keep people from reoffending after they've served their time.
Tonight, Alicia Nieves shows you how computer programming is keeping former inmates on the outside.
Prisons house more than 2 million people in America right now. According to the Department of Justice, 650,000 will get out this year, and it's expected that upwards of 83% of them will reoffend and be back. But does the recidivism rate and the number of people in prison in this country have to be that high?
When you want to make a change, at the last mile, we're using technology to try to solve the problem of mass incarceration.
The Last Mile is a program that has software engineers like Jason Jones.
That will help you so much more.
Remote into prison and teach convicts computer coding. Once they learn the skill and are released, former convicts and now coders are connected with tech companies like Slack, Google, and even Facebook.
You're talking about disrupting the status quo of people not normally getting access and opportunity.
The Last Mile program is defying the country's 83% recidivism rate. In its 10 years existence, there has been zero recidivism amongst its nearly 100 graduates. Graduates that include Jason Jones.
Not only are we driving down the recidivism rate where people get out and don't come back no more, but we also have the ability to go back in the communities and stop people from coming to prison in the first place.
What the last mile has shown is that change is possible.
Beverly Parenti and her husband, Chris Redlitz, founded the Last Mile program at one prison in California, and now it's in several across 5 states.
We're trying to create a platform that we can take across the country that will sort of level up expectation from people inside.
In total, about 500 offenders are going through the program now, and while their lives are potentially being changed, the financial burden to society is also being relieved.
We know for sure that there are better uses of our funds than spending on prison.
Generally, many people inside really want to do better. They want a second chance. They want the opportunity to be successful. So create that opportunity for them to be successful, because 90% of the people that are incarcerated are going to get out. So the question is, who do you want them to be?
I'm Alicia Nieves.
It's a big weekend, Kevin.
Big weekend, lots going on. You're talking about Groundhog Day, right?
Yes.
And the Super Bowl. and the first weekend of February.
And sunshine and temperatures.
A lot of things going on.
This was Indiana's finest today. Snow in the morning, melted off in the afternoon, and then, as we mentioned, you step into the weekend, and we'll step into a spring-like day on Sunday. This was the snow around 9 a.m. in Bedford. Debbie Hostetler sending in this picture. It was gone by mid to late afternoon. Shelbyville, also quarter to half-inch snowfall. Cheryl Ross sharing that picture on Facebook, so thank you very much for doing that. Temperature trend tomorrow, cooler than the next several days. We have 4 days in the 7-day forecast that will be at 50 or above. There's your average high 37. Since we step into February tomorrow, just point out the average